Hello and welcome to the Alosant Innovator Series. I'm April Lamont, the CEO of Alosant, and today I'm joined by Aaron Crawford from Pipsy. So great to have you here today, Aaron. Could we start off by sharing a little bit about your background and how you wound up leading this and founding this organization serving land developers?
Yeah. So I'm originally from a very, very small town in northern Wisconsin, unincorporated town. I moved down to Houston in 2007 to see about a girl who ultimately became my wife. She's from the
Nice.
Sugar Land area. Moved down and started working for an internet marketing, I guess, agency. They kind of had
Mhm.
a variety of different clients. One thing in Houston, though, is these ad agencies and the marketing agencies, they all have land development clients. So when I was down there, I was working on a variety of things, land development, lawyers, B2C, B2B type products. But I was kind of immediately drawn to the land development experience, and basically in 2000, so I left that company in 2008 and I started doing my own thing, which was a fantastic year to start a company, by the way, during a
Great
recession.
timing.
But yeah, then I started working with various agencies. It started in Houston, kind of started working its way outside of Texas, and everyone had land development clients, and they were, I was building the front end, programming wise, building the front end of a lot of these different websites, and I kind of noticed from developer to developer that everyone had the same issues, like getting information out of the builders, a formal way to communicate sales and contracts and traffic, and Pipsy was kind of like a side project that I was working on in 2015. Just started working on it when I could, in between projects. And I guess 2019 is when I got kind of like a, version, an alpha version, I guess, ready of the platform. And then I started showing some of the developers, and they were all like, "Can you have this online next week?" And I'm like, "I don't, sure." I'm a, I have a hard time saying no. So yeah, so we kind of started from there, working with various developers. Started in Houston, then it started working its way into Austin, Dallas, and now we're all the way from Hawaii to Florida. So we're kind of all over the place at the moment.
And we've had the pleasure of watching you and the product evolve over time with many shared clients. And it's very clear that Pepsi has become somewhat of an ERP or business intelligence solution for developers and really helping them with the day-to-day requirements that can be enabled by easy access to information. Can you tell us a little bit about that evolution and really where you are today?
Our mission statement is pretty simple. It's just helping and automating the day to day for land developers, right? If you think about how much data a land developer has, all the way from the point of it's an empty field, all the way to the point of there's a family moving into their dream home. It's a monumental amount of data, like all the way from cutting the land up to getting into builder contracts to the lot land inventory, analysis, the sales segmentation, the marketing. So what we're trying to do with Pipsy is kind of bring all of these, tame all this data, right? So the marketing data, the lot land inventory, bring it all into one spot, and then start building out tools and reports on that data. So one of the things that a lot of developers have to do is make very complex and very fast decisions based on the data on the ground. And if you're living in, spreadsheets or access databases or, whatever the case is, we've seen it all. A lot of times answering those questions could take days, weeks, gap out analysis, for the lot land people. Like, when am I going to run out of 50-foot product for Perry Homes in Section 3? If you're living in spreadsheets and trying to figure out sales pacing and remaining supply and all that, that could take a very, very long time to constantly keep on top of. And then your data gets stale if you're not constantly updating your spread. There's just a lot of different ways. Same thing for marketing, right? There's a ton of marketing reports inside Pipsy that kind of help marketers with their day-to-day. So if I'm trying to figure out who my 50-foot buyer is, if you're trying to figure that out in a spreadsheet, you have to sit there and crawl around and write a bunch of formulas and ultimately try to get somewhat of an answer for that question. With Pipsy, it's just a matter of going to our demographics reporting, specifying your 50-foot lot type, time range, and it'll tell you where they are, where they're coming from, their age range, first time buyers, the zip codes they're coming from, a lot of geographic data. So that's kind of what Pipsy does at a super high level, is it's taming all this data, bringing it all into one spot, and then building out reporting and public inventory for the prospects as well.
I can imagine as well, Aaron, with these more complex financing structures and reporting requirements, that this could be really helpful in staying in compliance. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is reporting to MUDs, the municipal districts, especially in Texas. That used to be a really fun job that someone would have to do every month or every quarter, or whatever the reporting timeline is. We have the data, right? So it's just a matter of, we have a specialized MUD report. Developers just go there, they dump it out into Excel or PDF, and then they send it off to the MUD, and it satisfies that requirement. So what used to take days of time is now just a button you click, and then you're sending it off to the MUD. So we've kind of seen it all with a variety of developers. We have some large, some small, and reporting to investors, reporting to like municipal districts, lids. It's all kind of just baked in Pipsy from day one. So when we do onboarding with a new developer, we typically get dumped usually an Excel spreadsheet, and then it's we'll take what we can get. Sometimes developers have a lot of data, sometimes they have a little amount of data. We just take everything we get, and then going forward, we're kind of on a track, right? So a standardized track. And that's that's kind of how we onboard people. We become the single source of truth for all this sort of stuff. This is the source where the builders enter the contracts and sales and traffic, and all that is stored, and we pull that automatically from the builders, and then we use that data to generate weekly reports, and sales segmentation and all that sort of stuff is automatic at that point.
Speaking of onboarding, can you talk a little bit about your onboarding process? What should a developer expect when they
Sure.
say, yeah, we're interested in moving forward?
Yeah, typically, just in terms of timeline, it's usually 2 weeks. It depends on the condition of the data. Sometimes we've seen some stuff on scanned documents that takes a little bit more time than an Excel sheet or a SQL database. But we'll take what we can get, right? So it's we say maximum usually of a month. We can spin up an instance in usually about a day, usually less than that actually now. But from that point, it's just getting the data that they have currently at the moment, and then we start working with our a GIS team to begin plotting out basically all the lot outlines for all the lots, and then the sections as well. And that's what helps us build the the public-facing consumer maps. We have a lot of mapping in the background for architectural review and lot status, figuring out what's going on within the community. So once those two things are done, that those are the big ones, and then we're live usually within a month. It depends on, again, the data, but
more or less, it's gonna take anywhere from a couple weeks to a month to get up and running.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's true for a brand new project or an ongoing project?
Yep. Yeah, I mean the brand new projects are easier because there's no historical data to import or anything like that. But we've pulled in projects that are been 3/4 through their life cycle. We've Johnson Development is one of the developers on Pipsy, and we took over the Sienna data, and you know how long that that property's been going. So yeah, so we've kind of seen big and small.
Sure. One of the other things that we've really enjoyed at Alosant and working with you and your team at Pipsy is you have a really thoughtful industry partnership strategy.
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that. I mean, it's kind of, some days it just feels like, hey, it takes a village to put these communities together and build them out. And what's your approach there?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we've been actively working on the past 6 months. We hired on someone in January that's kind of spearheading that. But we've been working with Alosant obviously for years. But one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to build API connections over to all these different kind of ancillary companies that are in our space, but do different things. Alosant is a great example, right? So we're communicating closed home buyer data automatically so that you can immediately set up new residents the day that they sign the contract, which is huge, right? We also have, we're starting to work with companies in like the drone space, right? So they can fly, your community weekly, and then we're automatically hooked into them so that on the weekly reports, we're now showing what that community is looking like during that week. So there's just a lot of different players, I guess, in this industry, and we try to, make friends in the sandbox, I guess, because ultimately at the end of the day, these partnerships I think strengthen the developers day to day, which is what we're all about. So
Sure, sure. That even extends to realtors in some markets. Is that right?
yeah, a good example again, Texas, Florida, Colorado. We're in. We have connections to the state. One thing that marketers have struggled with since the beginning of time was maintaining their own realtor database. Realtors move around. They, John Doe
They
versus
come in,
Jonathan
they drop
Doe.
out.
Yeah, you could kind of lose track of them, and maintaining your own database is it's near impossible. So what we do with Pipsy is instead of getting a name and an email, we're actually hooked into the licensing commissions at the state level. So we're getting the license number, and that's kind of like that realtor's unique ID number, and then we
Yeah.
can we don't really need all the information because we can pull that out of the state. So it helps marketers, especially developers with realtor programs, to automatically have a high quality set of data that says, these are our top 20 performing realtors, top 20 performing brokerages, if they're running an incentive program or whatever the case is. Again, trying to figure that out in the past was always a good time. Now it's just going to that realtor report and, there's Jane Smith is my top selling realtor last quarter.
So, I mean, that's all part of how you got to where you are today and why you're experiencing the high growth that you are. As you look through the rest of this year and beyond, what are you focused on? Where do you see more opportunity for Pipsy to add value?
Yeah, I mean, we just have this mentality of it's just never done. I mean, there's so many reports that we have in our queue at the moment. I looked at it and I just shut it off because it's just too much to to look at. Yeah, we have like 100 in some different tickets that are in our system of to-dos at the moment. But there's other things outside of just feature requests. We're starting to work on a open source project that we're going to be outsourcing some of our code to the industry because we feel like there's a lot of old legacy type specs and just the ways that builders and developers communicate between themselves. So we're kind of starting to work on open sourcing that and working with the industry to kind of create a common spec that's up to date. Because right now, like I said, everything is 20 years in the past and it needs to change. So yeah, there's a lot on the horizon, but ultimately just continuing to keep our eye on the ball. Everything that we do is kind of looked in through the lens of, is this going to help the developer? There's just a lot of different features that we're working on that is going to be helping them.
Without the technical part of how that happens, can you give us a couple of examples of what that's going to enable for that end user?
Yeah, so the open source project is aimed around the communication of data between the builder, usually the builder and the developer. Sometimes it goes to third party sites. Sometimes, well, for example, with Alosant, the way that we're communicating, there are some systems that were developed in it had to be 2000 or 2005 that have just been hanging around forever, and it's kind of holding people back in terms of the way that like a feed is coming from, I don't know, Perry Homes, for example, right? If they're trying to communicate their data, they obviously have everything in one file, and it's like 120 megabytes, and a lot of the times parsers fail, and the spec, the format, I guess, that it's in is how Facebook used to give out data in like I said in 2005. They moved away from that, so we're going to be we're in so many communities now. I think we're hitting 100 next month. So we are trying to kind of push the industry forward in terms of, updating the spec. Again, it's going to be open source. We're not charging for it. There's no, like, you got to be a Pipsy subscriber for it. It's just a way for the industry to kind of unshackle itself from these old legacy transmission methods.
Yeah. Thanks for elaborating on that. And of course, everyone's curious about how AI is going to make an impact. How are you thinking about AI in your part of the market?
So we've been building Pipsy's own AI for the last couple years now. It's up on our site. So we have been training a model to look directly at the developer's data. It's not communicating it outside of our server, but it's all local. So it's a security concern. But we're basically developing a chat GPT-esque bot for for the developer's data. Sometimes people are away, they're out in the field, maybe we don't have this exact report that's already loaded and they just want an answer. So what we're doing with AI is developing our own. And it's going to be a system where, if you're logged into the system, you can communicate directly, ask any question. When am I going to run out of 50-foot lots in this section? And it will understand your question and then formulate an answer based on the data that's currently inside the system. So that's
And
one way to.
within just your instance, so we're not seeing data
Exactly.
cross-populate.
Exactly. Yeah. Pipsy is completely set up. Everyone's on their own island, so there's no
Yeah,
cross-pollination of data. We're also developing a text messaging system. It's live now, but once upon authentication, the developer can text their Pipsy instance, essentially, ask these questions, and then Pipsy can understand the question. That's the hard part. And
yeah,
then, because AI is one of those things where a lot of these LLMs are pulling, figuring out how people speak based on internet data. But in the land developer world, there's a lot of terms that a general AI just wouldn't understand, like what's a
sure.
takedown date. So it's kind of like training a child to understand that this is what this means in this context, and that's kind of what takes a while. But I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be a very powerful tool for developers.
That's terrific. And so much of the work is out in the field.
Yeah,
And, we're not, always behind a large format screen where we can pull data. So
right.
those quick queries are going to be really, really helpful
Yeah.
in the moment on site in particular, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're aiming for a sub 10-second response. Again, it's kind of like texting someone at the office. Hey,
Could you tell me,
what's going on in this lot? Like, do we have a start on file? Do we have a complete? Is it bricked? What's the ARC status? That's the sort of stuff like when you're out in the field, you'll be able to text and get an answer like almost instantly.
yeah, that's terrific. And is that live yet?
It is in a beta format. We're collecting feedback basically on all the questions. I think we'll be kind of pushing towards a 1.0 version sometime this fall, if I had to guess. Everything's
That's
moving around
exciting.
pretty rapidly, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. It's it's a lot of hard work. When you're dealing with AI and how an AI is going to respond, there's so many nights where I'm just like, throw my monitor out the window. But we're getting there.
Good for you for having a head start,
Yeah,
couple years really digging into that. Like you, we segment all of our data by client, like those islands or instances are unique. And so I think that's a really smart
yeah,
way to think about it, and a way that AI really can add value, in real time, in an approachable horizon. So I think that
yeah. I
makes
mean,
a lot of sense.
sometimes when we've been asking questions to our current beta version, we've actually gotten responses back that have not only did it answer the question, but it provided additional context as to what was going on with that question. That's something that, we can build a million reports, but ultimately when you're talking to someone or talking to an AI, they're going to be able to give you even more context to the question that you asked that I think is going to be even more valuable for the end user.
So many times when we look at reports, we see something that triggers another question,
Very, yeah, yeah,
another query. And so that data structure is going to really bring that to the forefront very quickly for your
yep.
clients, for sure. Let's go back and talk a bit more about you. We ask all of our podcast guests 2 questions, and very excited to hear your perspective on them. The first is sources of inspiration. I mean, this is a very demanding job, and
Oh.
leading a company. And so where do you turn to recharge your batteries? What are the things you do?
Refreshment. In terms of like staying on top of the news in the industry, I mean, obviously listening to podcasts, this one obviously comes top to mind. But listening to a lot of, I'm a programmer by nature, so I lead a lot of tech blogs, and we have a large programming stack here. So we are kind of trying to stay on top of the digital events, I guess, that go on within the industry. We're always
Mhm.
watching those. But in terms of kind of, I guess, recharging batteries, I try to, and then I fail 75% of the time, shut my computer off on a Friday evening and not turn it on until Monday morning. We have a barn, and I enjoy working, I guess, with my hands, not just sitting behind a computer screen
With
all day
physical
long.
things?
Yeah, yeah, woodworking or changing brakes this weekend. I don't know, just something, that at
Yeah.
the end of the day I can have done something with my hands. So I think that, usually if I'm able to do that by Monday morning, I'm ready to go again. And in terms of inspiration, I've always been inspired by work ethic. Growing up in Wisconsin, I was always, I guess admired is the correct word. I always admired people that, like farmers up here that, they get up at 3:30 in the morning and they work till the sun goes down. And down in Houston, down here in Houston, so I have a lot of meetings at land development, info centers or welcome centers. Prior to the meetings, I always try to drive, the neighborhoods because, I can sit there and I see, recorded plats and I'm working on, inventory and stuff for all these sections, but I like driving actually through the sections. And I'm always amazed at the work ethic of these guys in the middle of July in Houston. I don't know if you've ever been to Houston in the middle of July. It's the only word for it is oppressive. The heat is oppressive. And these guys that are, sitting on the roof that are, installing asphalt shingles and they're wearing long jeans and long sleeve shirts. And I'm just amazed by these people. I mean, they're really the ones that make this industry move. Like Alosant and Pipsy wouldn't be here without guys like that. And the work ethic that those guys have is just nothing short of amazing to me. So anytime I'm having a bad day and I have a function that's not working, and again I'm ready to throw my monitor out the window, I just think it could be it could be on a roof and it's 130 degrees up and on an asphalt shingle. So yeah, it keeps me going. Your problems aren't that bad, Aaron. So.
Yeah. Well, this almost sounds like it's segueing into the next question, and that's what advice, life advice, career advice, knowing what you know today, would you offer the 25-year-old version of yourself?
Knowing what I know today, besides buying more Bitcoin, I would should have bought way more. It's just a focus. I mean, early on in my career, like I said, in 2008, I started that web development studio, and I was working on, I was working on land development. Again, I was working on B2C products, B2B products. I mean, I was kind of all over the place. And it just would have been, something I learned later in life is that you just have to focus on one thing and do it well. I always was drawn to land development. I knew in the back of my head one day this is just going to be what I do full time, but I kind of had a number of years where I was just kind of scattered. And it's easy to say now that you're not living, paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
You're just in survival mode well, at least I was at 25. But yeah, it would just be to get into this industry. I knew that I wanted to get into it earlier, and then just kind of again work on that project that I started in 2015, and maybe work on it a couple of years quicker than what I actually did. I mean, we went to market in we were live in 2019, but 2020 is kind of really when we went to market, which is, again, another fantastic year to start a company during the middle of a pandemic. I have a habit of starting on hard mode, I guess.
Well, we were right there with you. So
yeah.
When you can make it through the tough times, then you build that grit and resilience, when things are a little bit better. I'm still waiting for a normal year, Aaron. I don't know about you. But,
let me know if you see one. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, first and foremost, for being great partners. We love working with you and your team, and our cultures align so well, and we're just so focused on delivering value to our customers, our clients, and helping them be better. And so thank you so much for that. Thank you for spending time with us today, sharing your perspective and more about Pipsy. It is a great product and growing like crazy. Congratulations on all the success, and let's keep going. Thanks so much.
All righty. Thank you.
This episode of the Alosant Innovator Series is brought to you by DataBridge AI from Alosant. DataBridge AI organizes your siloed system data into actionable customer profiles, providing valuable insights without costly data restructuring or APIs. You can learn more about DataBridge AI at alosant.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alosant Innovator Series. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast, and learn more at alosant.com.